my involvement with NDRI, as people might know, has been quite long as well. I've recently retired and getting on with life outside of academia, as they say, but very hard to do that because you still get invited to places, and whilst I don't have the title of professor hanging with me at the moment, wherever I go, people acknowledge that, hey, Professor Wilkes, how are you? And so, Simon, I've got to come back and talk to you about it, possibly an lecture.
The pen's ready, Ted.
But kaya, everybody, kaya is the Noongar word that we use down here to say hello. So if you're walking up to me and you want to do it Noongar way, you say kaya, Ted. And I say kaya, Simon. But we also add another word to that which allows us to say welcome. So let me say it together. Kaya wanju. Wanju meaning welcome. And I know that we're here for a special reason. A colleague who I've done a lot of work with, Professor Dennis Gray, and other people who work in NDRI, I want to say to you all, it's a wonderful team. I've let Simon know this, that the work that NDRI does is absolutely crucial to what happens in this country. And we've fought outside of our weight division on numerous occasions, and I think you'll probably still need to do that. But let me say to you in Noongar a few words that allow me to feel good about why I'm standing here. Let me say, Nich wachak Noongar mama, ngan mam buja, wachak buja. I am an Aboriginal man who has connections back to this place, back to the Swan River, back to Perth, before 200 years ago. And many of us Aboriginal people who come to live in Perth today, and I see Mick Evans here somewhere, we know that this budja, this land, is beautiful land. And us Aboriginal people who have recognised the other people that have come here with expectations will tell you that this was our little Garden of Eden, and still is in many ways. Us Aboriginal people who wander through the traps of this beautiful forest, the Jarrah forest, the Karri forest, we have a special place. And we share that with others today. I welcome you in friendship to say enjoy it. Enjoy the land, but enjoy the human beings that are walking amongst you. We West Australians are a proud group of people, but we live on this side of the Black Stump, and it's a long way to where all the business occurs. And Professor Gray and myself and other people who work in NDRI have had to travel considerable distance to get our message across to others who sit in the powerhouses over on the East Coast. To Dennis, thank you for being a colleague, Dennis. And you and I did some hard work together. And at the end of it, yeah, we nearly collapsed on one another, but retirement for you two might open other doors. I'm hoping that you and I can continue to do some good work together, maybe in that anthropology field that both of us studied. Kaya, nunuk ngalanyenin wachak bucha. You're sitting on the land of Indigenous Australians called Wachak Noongar people. And the Noongar tribes, or the Noongar tribe itself, consists of 13 groups, 13 clans, for want of a better way of putting it. And south of us is the Binjara people. For those West Australians who are familiar with country, Binjara people are the tribe south of us, and the town Pinjarra has been named after them. People on the other side of the Mirranmora, or the Darling Range as others call them, are the Balladon Noongars. And people a bit north of us are called Yamaki, and the Yuwat Noongars are just north of us. So we're all Noongars. And we've all mixed, we've been disenfranchised by what's happened in history, and we today also live with dire need, and we need the academic rigour and the wisdom of people like yourselves to continue to fight for our rights, because until you get it right for Aboriginal Australians, we're always going to be fighting to try and improve the lot of all of us, because we have an impact on the mainstream society, and whilst we're still living in poverty and we're fighting for rights, we're going to have probably an adverse impact on the economies of scale within within our communities. My last words will be to give you a blessing and to say to the spirit of the Noongar people that I would say firstly, Nitjen Ngaungat Balangan, Ngain Demakamaran Vijurat, which are words that say, I follow in the footsteps of others before me. And usually I would refer to the Aboriginal elders who have come and gone, and I would say I follow in their footsteps because they leave me the messages that I need to hold with me and walk steady. But I say to you elder whitefellas now, and to whitefellas in general, and in the whitefella world we've named you Wodjula people. Right? And I've said jokingly in the past we didn't have an F in our language, but that's why we say Wodjula, because it's a shorter version of whitefella. Right? But we've got an F in our language today, I always say. But Pua Waggle Miao Jinning and Nitja Wachak Butcher, Pua Waggle Miao Jinning and Nitja, Henry, Pua Waggle Miao Jinning and Nitja, Professor Gray. So I've asked the spirit of the Noongar people to bless us while we walk on this land, on the Wachak Butcher. I've asked the spirit of our people, the Waggle, to continue to share a deep interest and a closeness to the National Drug Research Institute. And I've asked the spirit to bless our colleague Dennis Gray as he goes through the rest of his life. Bunawan Janan, thank you for allowing me to do this work.
So this fellow, Dennis Gray, a working class boy from the Swan Valley, began his working life at the age of 16 as a clerk for a farm machinery company. Since then he's been a soldier, a field anthropologist, an organisational analyst and manager of marketing research for a large US corporation, a public servant and an academic. His research has included social and cultural determinants of illness behaviour, the cost of terminal cancer care, child and maternal health in Southeast Asia, maintenance of cultural identity among Aboriginal Australians, and the political economy of Aboriginal health. For the past 26 years, as a leader of NDRI's Aboriginal Research Program, he's applied his experience to working with Aboriginal Australians to reduce alcohol and other drug-related harm in their communities. Today he's going to present a personal reflection on Aboriginal research at the National Drug Research Institute, its highlights and outcomes. Please join me in welcoming our colleague.
Thanks, Simon. Like Simon, I want to acknowledge the Wodjak Noongar people, their elders past, present and future, and especially Ted, who's been an outstanding advocate for his people. And it's great to have him here. Also, like Simon, I want to acknowledge those people that have come from interstate. We've had long working relationships, and it's great to have you all here. And other people have come long distances like Andrew Amor and David Atkins who've come down from Broome. As Simon said, I've been at NDRI since 1992, and I came here from what's now the Department of Indigenous Affairs, where I've worked for a couple of years. Initially, I was employed on a 2-year academic contract and stayed for 26 years. And what I want to do today is reflect on some of the highlights of my time at NDRI and what I see as some of the successes, some of the factors that have contributed to those successes, and some comments about the future. As most of you know, NDRI's research activities are divided among a number of teams, a number of program areas. Most of what I want to talk about today is specifically about the work that we've done in the Aboriginal Research Program. And I use the word Aboriginal rather than Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders because most of our work has been with Aboriginal people. While I'm going to talk about the work that the Aboriginal team has done, I want to make it clear that that work isn't the only work that's been done by people at NDRI amongst Aboriginal people. And we've worked closely with a number of people from other areas. Between 2007 and 2012, Professor Sherry Saggers headed up a team to look at early childhood interventions. And Anna Stern, who was then a member of the Aboriginal research team, collaborated heavily with her. We've worked with Professor Tanya Tikritzis on the things like the incidence of alcohol-related mortality and liquor licensing issues. We've worked with Steve Alsop on interventions to enhance treatment for alcohol-related problems in primary healthcare settings and on Aboriginal concerns about methamphetamine use. As well as that, Steve, Ted and I were chief investigators on a project headed by Professor Tony Butler to develop capacity to conduct research into Aboriginal prisoner health. Mandy Wilson was part of that project and she's taken up that work and is now heading up the program of her own in Justice Health. Steve and Simon contributed to work on brief cannabis interventions that Julia largely worked upon, and Wendy Loxley, who was at the time part of NDRI's illicit drug team, worked with us on injecting drug use amongst Aboriginal people. So there's a broad spread of work on Aboriginal issues. It's not just confined to the Aboriginal team. The National Centre for Research into the Prevention of Drug Abuse, as Andy was known, was established in 1986. Between that time and 1992, there were only 2 centre publications on Aboriginal issues. The first was by Ernie Lang, who did an evaluation of the WA government petrol sniffing program, and the other was a commentary piece by David Moore, who was then a PhD student, calling for anthropological perspectives to be brought to bear on discussion of Aboriginal drug and alcohol issues. This incidental approach changed in 1992. In 1991, the report of the Royal Commission into Aboriginal Deaths in Custody was brought out, and the Commission identified harmful drug and alcohol use as a key underlying issue in Aboriginal deaths in custody. The Commission was also critical of the national, what's now the National Drug Strategy, the campaign against drug abuse. In its first 6 years, it spent $286 million, and virtually none of that on Aboriginal programs or Aboriginal research. And the Royal Commission was also critical of the 3 centres of excellence for the fact that they'd done little work in the area. The Curtin Centre, under Professor David Hawkes, was the only one to take up the challenge laid down by the Royal Commission. And under Professor Hawkes, the decision was made to establish an Aboriginal research program. Okay. A senior research fellow position was advertised in the second half of 1992, and I successfully applied for that. Although I'd conducted no significant research into alcohol and other drug issues, I brought a number of attributes to the position. I taught epidemiological and social science research methods with David Atkinson at UWA. With Sherry Saggers, I'd co-authored a book on the political economy of Aboriginal health. And again with David, I'd conducted a major review of Western Australia's Aboriginal health policy, again where we identified Aboriginal drug and alcohol issues as being significant. And through all that work, I've developed a significant range of contacts amongst Aboriginal people. At the time the program was set up, we had a number of objectives, and these have remained more or less the same over the years. And the first was to conduct primary research into the area. The second was to build up the capacity of and empower Indigenous people to conduct their own research and to use research in constructive partnerships with Aboriginal people. And the third was to disseminate the results of our own primary and other secondary research amongst key stakeholders. Soon after the program was established, we appointed our first Aboriginal employee, Mary Drandich, and we embarked on our first research project, one which resulted in our first publication. This was a study of the impact of liquor licensing legislation on Aboriginal people, and as well as Mary, it involved a non-Aboriginal researcher, Lisa Moore. It was conducted in collaboration with Ted, who was then the CEO of the Aboriginal Medical Service in Perth and chair of the legal service at the time, and with Rod Riley and Sandy Davies from the legal service. This practical... and in setting the program up, I think one of the things we did was identify a number of key principles which we negotiated in discussions with Aboriginal people. I should have talked about this before. And one was that Aboriginal people should make decisions about what research is to be conducted in their communities. And it must work to reduce the burden of harmful substance use, not just to describe the problem, but to work to alleviate it. And that Aboriginal people should guide all stages of the research process. It should develop the capacity of Aboriginal people in the area, and it should be directing at providing information that empowers Aboriginal communities and organisations to control their own health services. And we've tried, to the extent possible, to adhere to those principles in all our research. As I said, that first project that involved Mary got us off track, and since that time we've conducted over 60 research projects, 160 publications, and 189 conference and workshop presentations. And I think one of the things that's important about that is the number of presentations that we've given to Aboriginal specific audiences. Again, trying to make sure that that information gets out to communities. Ted and I wrote a review some years ago about addressing harmful AOD use, and we said there are a number of things that need to be done. The first is to address the underlying social determinants. The second was to prevent and minimise the uptake of harmful alcohol and drug use. It was to provide safe acute care for those who are intoxicated, things like night patrols, sober youth shelters. It was to provide treatment for people who are dependent. It was to support those whose harmful AOD use have left themselves disabled or cognitively impaired. And it was to provide support for those whose lives are affected by other people's harmful drug use. And so, in terms of the research we've done, we've covered a number of areas. So, patterns of use and their consequences, some of the stuff that we've done with Tanya on Aboriginal alcohol-related mortality, social determinants of health and harmful AOD use. Sherry Saggers and I produced a book comparing issues in Australia, New Zealand and Canada, and we've written other articles about addressing the social determinants, both of alcohol and drug use and health more generally. We've focused on issues of supply and control, particularly liquor licensing restrictions, where we worked initially in Tennant Creek, but subsequently in Alice Springs with people like Donna and John Boffer at the Central Australian Aboriginal Congress. And we've done work on service provision, mapping the availability of services for Aboriginal people and looking at how those services can be improved. We've done work on the evaluation of particular interventions, and Anna was particularly prominent in that work, working with various organisations, and we've conducted secondary research and reviews. Most of the work that we've done is on alcohol. And that continues to be a key focus of what we work, because it remains the biggest drug and alcohol problem in Aboriginal communities. Most of the work's been done in this area, as I said, and a lot of it's been done in the Northern Territory, particularly, again, with Central Australian Aboriginal Congress, but also Tangentyere Council. And we've covered other areas as well. So with David Atkinson and other colleagues, for example, we conducted a random controlled trial of interventions to reduce tobacco smoking. With colleagues in the NT, we've done work on cannabis in Arnhem Land and Julia Butts continued this work looking at brief cannabis interventions in primary healthcare services. As well as that, Julia's done work on the use of kava in both Aboriginal and Pacific Islander communities. Nationally, with Scott and others, we've looked at policing of volatile substance misuse and ways to reduce the harms caused by substance misuse. And also, again, with a project led by Scott, we looked at the effectiveness of aviation fuel as a strategy for reducing petrol sniffing, and that was fundamental in providing the evidence base that then underlay the introduction of non-aromatic fuels like opal. And more recently, we've conducted work on methamphetamine use and strategies to reduce it with Queensland Aboriginal and Islander Health Council. So much of the work we've done is on service provision, and I think I want to highlight that there's clearly not enough time to go into everything, but prior to coming to NDRI at the University of WA, I'd worked with David Atkinson, where we've been training doctors, primary healthcare doctors, in research methods, and I brought to NDRI that interest in primary healthcare and what could be done through primary healthcare. Sherry Saggers, David and I, and Gary Hulse did work on addressing alcohol issues in a chapter for medical students. David, Sherry and Philip Stremple wrote a chapter on drug and alcohol issues in primary healthcare for a major book on Aboriginal primary healthcare. And we also did a review of substance misuse in primary healthcare for the Australian government. This coalesced in work that we've done on the mapping and financially quantifying of provision of services for Aboriginal people. And we conducted 2 reports for ANCD, which showed, amongst other things, that many areas of the country were and continue to be underserviced in terms of the provision of services. Secondly, that nationally there are as many Aboriginal community-controlled health organisations as specialist AOD services providing drug and alcohol services for Aboriginal people. There are also a larger number of Aboriginal community-controlled health services which weren't providing such services, and they could potentially meet many of the gaps in drug and alcohol service provision. And following up on that, on the heels of the review of substance misuse in primary healthcare that we did for the Commonwealth, Jenny Hefford, who was then head of the drug strategy branch of the Department of Health, approached Steve and suggested that we put up a proposal for up to $2 million to conduct research into the enhancement of treatment in primary healthcare settings. There were several aims to the review. Was to look at the existing interventions and the applicability of Aboriginal people, to identify factors that inhibit the application of those interventions, to look at gaps in knowledge, especially relevant to the process of implementation of interventions, and to commission action research projects to address the gaps and then develop recommendations for moving forward. What we did was called for expressions of interest. We funded 5 projects, and this project again was headed up by myself, Steve, Ted, Sherry Saggers and Corrie Over, who many of you know, who was on the board of NDRI at one stage and who was the deputy chair on NIDA, National Indigenous Drug and Alcohol Committee, along with Scott, with Ted as the chair. We funded 5 projects. I don't have time to go into them, but there's one particular project that stood out, and that was one conducted by Central Australian Aboriginal Congress. And what it involved was a 3-pronged approach to the provision of services. So there was a medical stream, a counselling stream, and a social support stream, which was identifying the social determinants of health locally. That project was evaluated by Peter Dabbs and colleagues from the Menzies School of Health Research and was shown to be effective. Since that time, the project's gone under various iterations. Anna Stern did one of the evaluations of that. And one of the things I must say about this area is things move slowly. Despite the interest we've had, despite the fact that many Aboriginal organisations are pursuing this, there's still a long way to go. I think one of the things that's on the horizon is that the Commonwealth Department of Health has commissioned Edward Tilton and Associates to develop a toolkit to enable Aboriginal community organisations that want to go this route to actually do those things. And although I sort of retired in June, I've still been working to provide support on that project. The second focus of our activities has been on capacity building. And there's three areas in which we've done that. We've tried to build capacity within NDRI itself, through collaboration with university collaborative projects, and building capacity within Aboriginal community organisations. Internally, we've provided research and educational opportunities for both Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal team members. And over the past 26 years, we've employed a total of 22 Aboriginal people at NDRI. While most were at the research associate level, there were two research fellows, two senior research fellows, and Ted as an associate professor. We haven't been able to, and one of the issues I think with this is there's no ongoing funding for any of these people. Unfortunately, a lot of people have been employed on short-term contracts, which is a real hindrance to the development of capacity. Nevertheless, although we haven't been able to keep track of all of the people that have been through, 4 of them have gone on to do PhDs, 8 have taken up academic positions, 1 went into law and 1 went back to law, and 4 have taken up managerial positions in Aboriginal organisations or government. And we don't want to claim credit for the achievements of those people, but certainly I think their time at NDRI has contributed to giving them skills which they've been able to use in other fields. The second area was through collaborative research projects, and we've been involved in 3 NHMRC funded capacity building projects. The first was one we conducted with Fiona Stanley from what's now the Telethon Kids Institute, under which we supported 10 Aboriginal team investigators. 2 of these completed postdoctoral research, 5 completed PhDs, and they published 33 peer-reviewed articles, 6 book chapters, and 4 major reports. Among the team investigators was Ted, and before he joined NDRI, Michael Wright, who completed a PhD under that project, and Jocelyn Jones, who also became an employee at NDRI. In 2009, Steve and I were chief investigators, and Ted was a mentor on a project headed by Professor Tony Butler, who was at NDRI at that stage before he moved to the University of New South Wales. The focus on that was Indigenous offending, including Aboriginal alcohol and drug issues. And among the team investigators were Michael Doyle, Jocelyn Jones and Mandy Wilson, who have been researchers at NDRI. Outputs from that project included 2 master's degrees, 4 PhDs, and 35 peer-reviewed journal articles and 28 reports. And although both Ted and I are now retired, we remain as chief investigators on a project led by Kate Conograve at the University of Sydney, which is aimed at creating pathways for Aboriginal researchers in these settings. And Christy Harrison, who previously worked for the Aboriginal Health and Medical Research Council, has now gone over to Sydney University to work on that project. The internal and external capacity activities that we've been involved in are what's to be expected of an organisation like NDRI. But what I'm most proud of is the work we've done to build capacity both to deliver services and to conduct research in Aboriginal community-controlled organisations. And in this regard, work that we've done with Tanajura Council in Alice Springs is exemplary. In 2003, there were trial restrictions of alcohol in Alice Springs, and despite calls for an independent evaluation, the Northern Territory government decided they'd do a phone survey to see what people thought of it, which ruled out virtually everybody in Alice Springs, especially people in the town camps. So I was approached by William Tilmuth, who was the CEO of Tanajura Council at that stage, to help them do a survey of people in the 18 Aboriginal town camps to see what they thought of restrictions. We provided training to these people. One of the participants, Juanita Sherwood, at that stage was with the Centre for Remote Health, and she's now a professor at the University of Sydney, managing a big project there. And so anyway, we produced a report, it was accepted by the Northern Territory government, and then William said to me, look, we've trained these people, what we need is an ongoing research capacity within the organisation. So we set up what they call the Research Hub, and the primary advisors to that were Sherry Saggers and I. We had Anna working up there on various things, and she provided day-to-day support. And Sherry and I travelled quite regularly to work with people. The people in the research team went on to do other things. They did a survey of movement between Aboriginal town camps and remote communities, which led to increased funding, because previously the town camps had been funded on the basis of census counts, but there was a much larger service population coming from remote communities. They did a project on telephone use amongst Aboriginal people and various other things. Two of the women have actually gone on now to set up their own research consultancy. It's called Aquajera Terra, which means the Two Ladies Consultancy. And I think William Tilmuth wrote to us expressing some satisfaction with the work we've done. The next area was dissemination of research findings. And, we've published more than 160 journal articles, reports, whatever. We developed a database on specific drug and alcohol interventions. This was in response to Aboriginal people coming to us and saying, what are other people doing? And so, with Anna's computer expertise, we established a database in which we tried to document all of the projects that were being conducted around Australia, what their foci were, and unfortunately it was something that was very expensive to do, because it required constant updating, and because it wasn't funded, we had to discontinue it. But there, the ANCD, Australian National Council on Drugs, stepped in, and they called for tenders for the 1999-2000 financial year to look at the full range of Aboriginal specific drug and alcohol interventions, the money that went into them, and the types of interventions that funded, and that led to an ANCD report. The ANCD then commissioned a second report for the 2006-2007 financial year, in which we were able to compare what changes there were. There was some increase in funding, but still vastly underserviced areas of the country. And then a third was being planned for the 2014 year, when the ANC was disbanded and replaced by the Australian National Council on Drugs, which unfortunately doesn't have the freedom that the old ANCD does. It's no longer an advocacy committee, and it doesn't have the research funds available to it that the ANC did. But I think nevertheless those reports were quite useful. We also developed an annotated bibliography, which grew out of a small bibliography that I had done. And again, with Anna's expertise, we developed a much larger bibliography. Unfortunately, again, it wasn't something that was funded, and it was very expensive to maintain. But this is where I think we were rescued in a way by collaboration with people from the Indigenous Health Infonet and its AOD Knowledge Centre, so with Mick and Neil there. And we've done a number of things with them. The Knowledge Centre has its own database now on projects. It's continued the work on the bibliography. We have. I've been on the advisory committee as Anna, and we've conducted various reviews. So we produced a review of alcohol and interventions, which is the most widely accessed paper on that report, and Julia Butts just completed a review on Carver. We've also done webinars. Ted and I did a webinar on alcohol and drug issues in general, and Mandy Wilson has done one with Ngari Pigram on justice issues. And again, I think one of the strengths of this has been that collaboration with other organisations, in this case the Infonet. In terms of what we've done, in 2006 the team received a couple of awards. One for, it was a National Drug and Alcohol Award for Excellence in Research, and the second was a Curtin University Vice-Chancellor's Award for Excellence. As well as that, individual team members have been on, particularly Ted. In 2011 he received the Public Health Association of WA's President's Award. He was awarded an Order of Australia in 2014. In 2016, the Australian Medical Association's Distinguished Career Award, and just a month or so ago he was given recognition for his lifetime of input at the National Indigenous Drug and Alcohol Committee. Anna Stern has also received various awards. She received a Curtin NAIDOC Week Certificate of Appreciation for commitment and dedication to helping people in the community affected by drug and alcohol problems. And in 2012, she received the APSAD First Peoples Award. John Boffa, who is at Central Australian Congress and an adjunct associate professor, and Donna received the 2016 ANA Award for Excellence in Healthcare. I was also named on the Drug and Alcohol Honour Roll, but the honour which I'm most proud of is this. For those that can't read, it says, to Dennis Gray for believing in us and for your great support. Thank you for Tamanjura Research Team.
That handle's been repaired and it's still holding strong.
In terms of impact, there's no doubt that our research has had various impacts. Among other things, we've had input into national and state territory policy documents, including the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Peoples Drug Strategy and the Northern Territory Alcohol Framework. It's informed the allocation of funding for alcohol and other drug and primary healthcare funding. It's informed the response of Aboriginal peak bodies to alcohol and illicit drug issues. It's led to improved service delivery at local levels. And we've developed or contributed to guidelines or resources used in the screening and treatment of AOD problems. I think there have been a number of elements to our success in this, and I think the first is Aboriginal leadership and participation. both within Andrew, particularly through Ted's role, but also working with Aboriginal leaders like Scott and Donna. The second has been collaboration. As Ted said, we've punched outside our weight, and without collaboration, particularly with Aboriginal community organisations, we couldn't have done the work that we've done. And I think that's an essential element of going forward. The other thing's been teamwork. If you look at our list of publications, I don't think there are any, maybe one, that have been authored by a single person. They've been co-authored by members of the Aboriginal team itself, and as I said, with other people from Andrew. Another issue has been the national focus, and I think that's been crucial, and I'll talk about that again in a moment, but I think we're stuck here in Western Australia, but in fact most of our research has been in places like the Northern Territory, South Australia and Queensland. I think it's important that we do more work, or Andrew does more work in Western Australia, but I think it's clearly got to have a national focus, and if it's to be used, it's got to be taken up by people, again, like people like Craig and Varcho, who I know has taken up a lot of the work that we've done. We've had a broad but interrelated research focus, and again, I think that's important. I think there's a danger in becoming too specialised. I think one of the things that we've done is had that broad focus. Things have been interrelated, and it's led to invitations to do other work. I think the dissemination of our results has been important, again through partnerships with Aboriginal community organisations, but again with organisations like the Health InfoNet. The other thing that's been important is community service. A lot of the work that we've done, it hasn't been in terms of research, but it's been helping Aboriginal organisations, providing advice. And again, I think that's led to other successes. Because I think one of the things is that success breeds success. I think the fact that we have been successful has led other people to come to us and ask us to participate. And I think it's important that the research is up there, that people are aware of it nationally, because I think that's the backbone of going forward. The other thing I think is the support of environment and financial resources. I think the NDRI board has been important, and a lot of it depends, though, upon who the board members are. You know, we've had, and I'm going to say a few things here, and these are in relation to the Aboriginal research team, not necessarily to NDRI as a whole, but I think at different times we've had board members who've been particularly interested in Aboriginal issues and gone out and actively promoted them on our behalf, and I think that's an important thing. I think NDRI itself has been a supportive environment. David, in setting the program up, I think Steve has been the director for a long time. Aboriginal issues have been a passion, and he's gone out and advocated on our behalf, brought in work for us. Simon's just taken over, but I know that he's got a strong commitment to the area as well. Also, I think in terms of NDRI, the people in support services have been crucial. Without people like Joe, who do the sort of everyday work, we wouldn't have made the progress that we've made, and I think they're unsung heroes within NDRI. In terms of the university, we've had, in some ways, the university has been supported. We've received large amounts of money, but in some ways it's been feast or famine. I think in terms of the Faculty of Health Sciences, particularly when Charles Watson was the head of the faculty, he was a strong advocate for what we've done. I think in some of the other people there's been benign neglect, and we haven't had the promotion of our Aboriginal work in the way we had when Charles was there. In terms of the Department of Health, again, I think it's been feast or famine, depending upon who has been there. I think the work that Jenny Hefford, who commissioned that primary healthcare research project, who provided money for NDRI to employ TED, was crucial. But I think a lot of there have been several people in there, and I think there's been varying degrees of support. And I think that it's crucial again for the activities going forward to have that level of support. Now's the time, I think, for a sad reflection, because I've been in this area for 26 years, and I think I'm extremely disappointed with the lack of progress that's been made. I think if you look at the Prime Minister's report on the closing the gap issues, only 5 of what I consider, only 2 of 7 fairly modest targets have been met, are on track to be met. We still have high levels of drug and alcohol problems amongst Aboriginal people. And longer than 25 years ago, Sherry and I wrote a book on the political economy of Aboriginal health, and we stated that no government of either persuasion has committed the resources that are needed to address Aboriginal inequality, and I think that remains the case today. And Ted's made this point again and again. Australia is one of the richest countries in the world, but many of its Aboriginal population are in extreme disadvantage. We've got the resources to alleviate this, and investing in it, or putting money, is an investment to the country's future and a commitment to equity for people. But I think it also requires leadership from politicians. We often hear about lack of funding, but in doing that, I think politicians put the interests of the wealthiest in society above those of the poorest. And I think although that we've done some good work, I think there's a lot of work that needs to remain.